Thanks for joining us for an evening of readings from Big Other's Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a Hauntology. My name is John Madera, and as publishing editor of Big Other, I'm delighted to feature 12 of the folio's contributors, each of whom will read from their contribution to the folio. But please allow me to first return to the music you just heard, which is an audio collage I produced featuring master Puerto Rican percussionist Giovanni Hidalgo and Puerto Rican salsero Héctor Lavoe singing Flor Morales Ramos's Canto a Borinquen, Song to Borinquen, which was originally released on Willie Colon's album Asalto Navideño in 1971. Quote, "And I'm going to sing to you, Borinquen, from the other life," unquote, Lavoe sings. Quote, "And I'm going to sing to you, Borinquen, from the other life," unquote. What's fascinating about that phrase, la otra vida, the other life, is that it's used in two ways in this song. One, to distinguish life on the mainland from life on the island, but later it's used to suggest the afterlife. Wait, listen. Lavoe is still singing to Borinquen from the afterlife. Listen. And I'm going to sing to you, Borinquen, he sings, from the other life. And I'm going to sing to you, Borinquen, from the other life. But wait, listen. Listen to the residents of Puerto Rico who were recently killed by Hurricane Fiona. Listen to the ones who haven't yet been included in the final death toll. They're singing to Borinquen from the other life. They're singing from the afterlife. Listen, too, to the 3,000 to 5,000 residents of Puerto Rico who died by the effects and aftermath of Hurricane Maria, which catastrophically pummeled the island in 2017. They're singing from the afterlife. Listen to the thousands of Puerto Ricans who still lack access to clean water, food, and basic necessities, who remain without electricity more than a week after Hurricane Fiona made landfall, which had unleashed floods and landslides, collapsed bridges, ripped up asphalt from roads and flung the pieces around, and wiped out the already terrible power grid. Listen to them. They're singing too, not from the afterlife, but from the other life. But what are they singing? I won't sing for them. I won't speak for them because I can't, but here is what I am singing. I am singing against the two wings of the oligarchic raptor, the vicious bald eagle that has kept Puerto Rico in its bloody talons since 1898. I am singing against Joe Biden, who, among many other things, is a career-long advocate of the heinous Jones Act. His having stalled on waiving it, not to mention rescinding it outright, is not merely wrong, but murderous. I should note that Biden took 10 days to temporarily waive it, while it took Trump 8. So what does that tell you? I am singing against wealthy foreigners who flock to the island to revel on Puerto Rico's beaches and get the tax breaks that are not available to Puerto Ricans who are being displaced by these very, very wealthy foreigners. I am singing against politicians enriching themselves at the people's expense. I am singing against population shrinking, which stems from declining manufacturing, lack of health care, falling birth rates, brain drain, and climate change. I am singing against the political consensus in Washington that wants indefinite continuation of the status quo, which is to say colonialism, imperialism, etc. I am singing against Obama, who in 2016 signed PROMESA, the Puerto Rico Oversight, Management, and Economic Stability Act, into law. PROMESA created a financial oversight board made up of unelected officials who have the authority to overrule Puerto Rican lawmakers. They slashed pension funds, closed hundreds of schools, cut funding to the University of Puerto Rico, and created a work requirement that people have to satisfy before they can qualify for food assistance. Because of its continuing devastation, its catastrophic consequences, etc., I call PROMESA Hurricane PROMESA. I call the United States Hurricane United States. Yes, I am singing against all those things, but I am also singing for things. I am singing for abundance. I am singing for the banana, papaya, and coffee fields that were also battered by the storm. I am singing for their growth. I am singing for freedom, for independence, for autonomy, which is to say, I'm singing for a decolonization process with reparations in service of a transition toward independence. Yes, I'm singing for independence, but I'm also singing for insurrection, for revolution by whatever means necessary. Thanks again for joining us for an evening of readings from Big Other's Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a hauntology. The folio is a kind of phantasmagoria, a haunting of various embodiednesses and dismemberments. It's an active remembering, remembering, a knowing, conscientious foregrounding of the past and present and imagined futures that conjures ghosts that disturb the peace of the contemporary. And isn't that why we artists are here to disturb the peace, as James Baldwin defines the role of the artist? Oh, I had the t-shirt I'm wearing custom made for my 50th birthday this year. The image is a detail from Puerto Rican Haitian artist Jean-Michel Basquiat's griot, which is not a reference to the Spanish word for cricket, but a Hispanicizing of griot, the Creole, etc. term for those who keep history alive through the role of storyteller or poet. Some might find it ironic that I would choose to make further visible such a hypervisible artist until you consider how often Basquiat's Puerto Ricanness, a fraught, contingent, contentious, heterogeneous term to say the least, is invisibilized. On to tonight's readers from Big Other's Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a hauntology. Maritza Macaulay's poems here limn the past as, quote, ghosted hunger, unquote, the, quote, mouths and minds of misted ancestors, unquote, and, quote, ghosts under the grass, unquote, all of which coheres into a lyrical memento mori.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Maritza Macaulay, and I'll be reading 5 poems which John Madera published this year in Big Other's Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a hauntology. So the first poem is called Past. I swallow the past, setting myself against the back of a young birch tree. The past is pulped, palpable, and is large and too huge to choke down. When I live in the present, I feel newly cleaned and scrubbed by sun. When I face the day brightly, I see the world through baby eyes. I see freckles of color and rainbow light. So what to do? What I shall do? I shall defy hauntings. I digest the past and all its spikes, then I will forget it. I will know the past. It has kissed me blithely and squatted in my house. I will feel the wild grip of past and know it still struggles on my skin, but I will not see it. It will be in me, but I will not love it. The past, that ghosted hunger, look, I'm going to ignore my appetite. O present, I open my mouth to consume you in full. The next poem is called Aren't You Afraid? If I go down, I'll go down whistling. Find me border busting, singing the meanest songs. I stop waiting for any new man. I tramp and burn and tussle. I soar without stopping. Your old light dims darker, but I see perfectly fine. Yesterday you asked me, aren't you afraid? Of the truck dipped in night growing closer, of the men who ripple the hills poised to rush down. I said, I live in motion. I neither rush nor slumber. Sure, fear is the trickiest insect, but I already swatted him down. The next poem is called Retribution. They told me I'm not fit to stand near their shoes, and I told them I'm panther soft. I move smoothly. I sit like swan. I'm rock heavy, big as boulder. They told me I'm the sludge they kick laughing. I said I'm huge, hot, and shining. I'm the road at midnight without wanderer. I'm the cool when the night feels like blister. They told me, and I stopped listening. I tell them I'm the rain that drowns sycamores and burrs fertile greens. I tell them, baby, if you can't feel my rain, then you can't feel a damn thing. And baby, I'm sorry, but not sorry for you. This next poem is called Rooting. To root, to stick the firmest parts of your body into the heat of the earth and see what stretches up. To reach for the lowest part of soil and find your face there, along with the mouths and minds of misted ancestors. To fit your loving body into spaces that know you fresh. To seek comfort in the tongues of flowers. I'm still looking for my best ghost under the grass. I grow, I grow, I grow. This last poem is called Without Control. Limitations are a scarcity. I rise, shaking off the broad shackles of control. I don't starve next to borders. I live vibrantly, drenched thick and splashing color. I'm not confined to cells or shifting undulations. I walk straight lines easy, confirmed in the stride I walk, and you'll see it. Damn, even if you don't. I embody the next new and the dark shallows I bring into me and shiver off. Here's the last sorrow. I don't sense it lasting. Here's the last pain. I understand it in full. I love swiftly and move soft. I am here, I decide it. I am here and I remain boldly. Thank you.
Forcefully addressing, quote, erasure, modern genocide, unquote, Dimitri Reyes in From a Current State of Being writes, quote, we're scrying a future that says, we are here, I am here, unquote, which brings to mind, among other things, We Still Here, Nos Tenemos, a powerful documentary foregrounding a community of Puerto Ricans' horizontally organized recovery efforts post-Hurricane Maria.
Peace and blessings, peace and poetry, and peace and prosperity, mi gente. My name is Dimitri Reyes, and I'll be reading 4 poems which John Madera published in this year's Big Others Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a hauntology. There's so many great writers in this year folio, and I was honored to be considered, and I was even more honored to be around these lovely voices. So the first poem is actually called Made in America. I thought they would be of madera, the kind with splinters, that this item from its birthplace across an ocean could come with the authentic flag carved into the handle as if sliced from a tree. Each instrument cured by the scent of café con leche. I look at this USPS box as if to ask why you aren't wrapped in enough tape to waterproof yourself because you've traveled oceans, like a message in a bottle, no certificate of authenticity. Instead, this maraca was made by hands that pulse to the pace of manufacturing novelty musicas, enough to afford a jibaro hat, enough for endless chicken feed to cast the way it's depicted on that one mural in that one legitimate Puerto Rican restaurant. I can only blame the Bermuda Triangle for this etched-in plastic. My instrument will shake with the sound of an Anglo-percussionist caricature. My American voice, a poquito poquito suave suavecito fabrication that silica gel packets can't hide behind maracas or mouth. I will not be taken seriously during Hispanic Heritage Month, even when the pain of my flag begins to crown the crackle of heavy tongue between teeth. This next poem is called A Boy Who Finds His Way. A Puerto Rock confesses, it says, Yo soy. Something unexplainable happens to a body when a name is uttered. A tethering between planets, a game somewhere between where you from and who are you, where names nicked, bought, and sold are transferred from soul to soul into a combination of words catch a body. White boy is a nickname. Real name a placeholder for white boy. Real name is a given name of a white man, the name of a soap opera villain that gives boy a better shot. But the first name could not hide boy's last, the Latinate root, still the villain. Soy blanco? I'm not sure. But when a cop is driving behind me, I automatically think of ways I might have broken the law, and by the first traffic light, I can feel shakedowns, chain gangs, and jail cells in my chest. My heart is made of black steel, a pot of boiling sauce, but not just sautéed in garlic, Scotch bonnets, sazon, and cilantro. Sometimes I am asked, are you Indian? Whether they think Asian or mistaken Asia for India or Americas, I'm not sure. Either way, the question still stands. What is it to be Indio when the many shades of brown become just another gray area? When are the bodies connected through a common wind? This one is from A Current State of Being and has a quote that begins the poem. What's happened here is a perfect storm. While it was really bad for the people of Puerto Rico, in the long term, it's a godsend if people look past that. This is by Halsey Minor, founder of CNET, from the New York Times. This was on February 8th, 2018, just a few months after Hurricane Maria. There is no commonwealth here or there, and my people didn't know until they knew. And Harvard recorded 4,645 deaths, and since the government recorded about 3,000, and officially or allegedly are both 4 syllables, and September 20th is a day of silence, and the island again sings, and now is the time to buy property in PR, and there is still debt. And if feathers were dollars, we need 100 billion of mine. And if feathers were infrastructure, I'd be threadbare. And flights are cheap. And our people talk about an exodus to the mainland. And our people talk about an exodus to the island. And a breeze says, "Quítate la máscara." When people come back, when people buy and laugh and hug, when they get drunk and cry y cantar and swim and party and dance and wear straw hats and don glasses and wipe sweat off their bodies and smile and lie and cheat and buy and clean and relax and tax and use and sniff and smoke and shoot and bury and pray and manipulate, not resuscitate, but buy and plan and buy and waste and displace and deface and erase, and what the fuck is a tax-free and a Logan Paul? And Brock Pierce is the next white Jesus bringing us to paradise. But what about the intelligence of our people? And the beauty of the sand, the rainforest, the campo, the concrete, the mountains, the castles, the music, the fruit, and the roots of sunlight I can barely imagine unless I try to feel. And the ugliness of the name Puertopia translates to an imagined port. And what is it to dismiss something perfect as slipshod imagination, wrong erasure, modern genocide, where history takes repeating under my wing, where 3 tenants are hurting wind beneath my appendages, wrong erasure, modern genocide, in case you didn't hear. Cryptocurrency and colonization are both 5 syllables, where an isla 100 by 35 miles is microcosm of what goes on all over the world, where a protester yells, "Pa'l carajo Rosello, la promesa y la junta," and I attempt to speak to the island without speaking for her. But has it needed for me to speak when mi gente's voices ring beautifully? Our mouths are satellites frequencing through sound. Hear our music through a microphone, a megaphone, words on a page. When a child reads their first La Borinqueña, when they hear her for the first time, carrying the weight of an entire universe, seeing Americans marvel at her strength. See, we are not blind to dreaming nor our own power. See, we are all bound to living much more than dying. And across the us we're scrying a future says, we are here. I am here. Thank you for listening thus far. This last poem is Somewhere Boricua Picks Up the Phone, and this is in response to the late Ntozake Shange, may she rest in peace, his poem, I Need to Talk to a Puerto Rican. Escúchame, hermana, we're here and promise to lay you down. Decir tu soul sister words in either language that was forced upon us, and I'll hold you under my bosom until we match heartbeats. Poeta y alma hermosa, the lifeblood of unity in a held out hand, I thank you, for every uttered vowel was a piece of rainbow that helped hold each other up. Let us talk one last time in a tongue that assaults us both, that says we are here, will be here, and one day be gone, but not forgotten. No, because the body is separate entity from soul. Your voice is what's remembered most. So let this grito be just for you. Let these streets sing joy through even the tiniest of holes, universes between the fabric of head wraps. In your name, let's kick up Mother Earth and invite her back into our pores, so in the face of death, you make us braver than before. Escúchame, hermana, we need to talk. There is a future, and we'll be in it. I promise. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to some of my poems. I'm super excited for these. And again, I'm super excited to be in this group of all these amazing, amazing Puerto Rican writers. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a blessed one.
Edwin Torres' 3 poems employs riverine lines and, quote, arc-eology, unquote, as Torres would say, and I would add an, quote, anarchaeology, unquote, that excavates, troubles, explodes language, history, memory, identity, and more besides. The poem, quote, my facial, mycelial, my mask, unquote, engaging, quote, blooded apparitions, unquote, and a cascade of interruptions of time, quote, time running, you phantasm here, bloomed by desperation, unquote.
Hello, I'm Edwin Torres, and I'll be reading my poem, My Facial, Mycelial, My Mask, which John Madera published this year in Big Other's Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a Hauntology. Okay, here we go. My facial, mycelial, my mask. My masks are made with treaties torn off bodies of interruption. Pardon my body's interruption. Pardon my triggerruption. My masks are made of the chosen majority. Pardon democracy crockpot. Pardon banana repoo-poo. Pardon my variant. My masks are made of the best diaspora. Order in the next millennia will throw in unsocial remora circa 2020. Strike that 1023. Gone. Strike that. Breathe. I'm a Yoruba-based archaeologist, just released for time served, defacing society's blind spot. Pardon my blood. Pardon my visit. Pardon my flesh. My interruption is your day. I'm a lifelong missionary for the not filled in. My masks are made of skin bronze from the backwoods of annihilation, sewn on the sails of the washed-away massacre of centurion ships, from galaxies harvested on dreamt-of balconies, harboring imagistic leaders born of singed opportunity. Pardon, breathe, breathe. My masks are stretchable yet made to suffocate around your fleshy parts. The parts you believe in, the parts you feel at night. Got blood on your hands? Got red, got hot, got stink on your hands? Order in the next 30 nucleics and we'll throw in utopic entrails, hypnotized by your past, Christian by fires ravaged on the shores of cloven change. I'm a tesseract for Instagag, just revoided by the white, audible for the next Anthropocene, and will throw in cataclysmic patterns climbed over weather world's tornadoed imperfections. We'll throw in breathe, strike that don't, pardon my don't. My derelicted class structures now listed, now you're just listing, stories, now you're just listing for something to hear, something to say, now you're torrential gust. Now you're the ones who you run from. Your ravaged fires, your people, now your mission makes an entrance. Now you have something to get at. Now something comes to you. Now the poem starts. After listing excuse of syntax for morality, at the beginning of the side-by-side tectonic, after bestilient myth before selfie display, the erect incarceration of the body, of the fearsome apology you always wanted, strike that I always wanted, for you to be in it. Now you're in it. For synapse to more sequential carnivory, peer transparence, now you cannibalize the language for entry. What happens to the giver once the comfort of the giving is gone? What happens to the wrenched apart apathy once now is gone? What happens to the drive for these words? From out of the mighty, almighty, eluded the summoned totems, the shoulders I stand on, the hands holding me steady, the appearance of my shakable foundation in this mask. Order now in your listening will root foundation, formation, interstitial tendril for summation, those shunned words, the shunned, the steady shunned affirmations of where travel gives me lead. Lodestar, knifed, effervescential logarithm. These masks are 100% starfields, constructed of interruption, 100% interruption. my starfield intelligence, my doing with interruption every day. I am interrupted from morality every damn day in the field of my ancestors, my listening. Now you're listening. Now you're ancestors. Now you're my ancestors. Palms out, palms burned, bruised, overlanding what we walk on. Every day, our blind spots shine brighter, our fingers brighter, our glass dulls ancestry, obliterates the handheld galaxies we offer our lives to, in patterns of synchronous inkology. My masks are made of 100% synchronicity. Look, in the next 60 lines, I'm listening, answer me, I'm listening, I'm a list of asynchronous mistakes. Astinctual, extapedipant, sound out the chorus of your misspelling. Extemporis, impolvent, sound out your mistaken mold-inducing purification. Mastered over cycles interference, fostered interference, adopted traumas are my location. These masks are made of location, my era located by carbon flirtation, injustice, and mayhem. My filtered upbringing, rerouted by something you can wear around your head, something that wears you back, that feels you back around your parts. The viva you lose, the lala you get. A body locates interruption to feel its recording. Check out my feel recording with this mask. Echo that spirit, your spill recording with 100% orality. Order now. Time is running. There are 2 minutes left to this poem. My masks are new life for the unencumbered. Decumber your expectancy. Order 1,000, 100 at a time. I'm not only a customer, I am a Yoruba-based Latin ecstasy, hawking my vibe by the side of a road. Newly released from itinerant robes, ethnic obliteration is my karma today. My masks are made from books I'll never be, poems I haven't written, sewn with inherited threads, perceptual affirmations, for paralyses I've never breathed, diseases I've never had, people I've never killed by breathing on them. Pardon me, have I never breathed? Look, off topic. Listen, mine are the ones to get. Minds are the ones to order, made from the poet gaze, a Rorschach for inclusivity. See me, through it, see you. Code switch, easily canonized. Did I say how they fit around the tongue, how they strap across faith and lesion, how hypocrisy is a weighted fissure, looking for purity? Here, insert a sin you believe in. Here, at the tip of the earlobes. Here, listen, sapped of nowhere the listen is godless. Insert a victim you follow. Here, I am letting you go. Order now before we're both. I've just seen ahead of what's holding me back. You, before you're gone, holding me back. You. What I share with my mask is what I'm looking for. The troubled eclipse of my fortitude, unraveling here in my mask. Does that perplexity for a cosmic ever field count as wisdom or sanity? Look. Those that will be quick to call me done are embattled by insight. My insight can now be rendered, be ordered, be yours. In the next 11 lines, I am a Yoruba-based paleo spirit. I graduated from blooded apparitions. In the next 9 lines, my masks are made of differences, indifferent to perception. My heart interrupts, the body's insistent approval. Time running, you, phantasm, here. Bloomed by desperation, our layered ambivalence, systemic in the seams of our masks, row upon row, where I don't know what I'm finding, but what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Quote, stay on that ghost tip, unquote, Willie Perdomo tells us in one of his luminous haiku. In others, quote, cool hawks want to dap, unquote. Quote, storm falls for you, unquote, and more besides.
Hello, my name is Willie Perdomo, and I am going to read a selection of haikus, most of which were written between the months of March and May 2020. These haikus were recently published in the Big Others, a Puerto Rican writer's FOLIO, a hauntology. Big up to John Madera for putting it together. You check the forecast, look for a southern fried mood, cool hawks want to dap. Heaven sends a choice, I tell my ears to be still, a cardinal whistle. Get used to breathing, the first good slap of daylight keeps your soul alive. Tongue feels slow right now, spring shadows hide and talk shit, a storm falls for you. So far, thank the gods, these late replies remain safe. Stay on that ghost tip. Send me a signal, I miss the gangster in her when I don't get high. Hold her with both hands, smart winds aim to grasp nothing, the sun's yellow alarm. Peace, thank you.
Peggy Robles Alvarado's phantasmatic nocturnes offer, quote, glorious unraveling, unquote, quote, lands we inherit through memory, unquote, and a, quote, galaxy of storytelling to adjust to darkness, unquote, poems as luminous as they are numinous.
Hello, hola. My name is Peggy Robles Alvarado, and I will be reading the poem For Who and Why. This poem is dedicated to all the children of the diaspora who understand cuando la sangre llama, when the blood calls. It is for who I write and why I write. This poem was published by John Madera, June 2022 in Big Others Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a hauntology. For who and why? For those of us who buy dream catchers and rocks carved with the image of Atabe made in China, trying to reawaken what our bodies are certain still lives. For those of us teaching our tongues to bend and curve, excavating Taino linguistic caves rooted in our mouths in search of new ways to say, we love us. For those of us who never believed in original sin, so we wickedly suckled and surrendered our sweetest folds under the framed faces of a blue-eyed God that witnessed our glorious unraveling. For those of us who knew the ocean is a woman, since the womb tussled our newly formed bodies, calling us her little fish. For those of us who failed in schools that never learned to pronounce our names, even when we stressed the accent marks like clave and thunderclap. For those of us who grew tired of Judy Blume books and found Esmeralda Santiago and Sandra Maria Esteves just in time. For those of us who couldn't locate our islands and archipelagos on altered U.S. maps, but always felt the geography of bone and blood tapping our spines. For those of us who adorned homes with shiny plastic fruit centerpieces and fake plants, where synthetic evergreens wouldn't remind us of all that had died in exchange for our living. For those of us who made fire escapes and front stoops perfect for goal setting through storytelling, knowing the wind carried us, making a sacred skyline of our words. For those of us who tattoo and adorn our bodies with symbols our ancestors left us, so we may become vessels they help navigate. For those of us who sink our fingers into diasporic soil, chanting the names of lands we inherit through memory, filling with seeds all that is missing, making a hybrid urban garden of our new identities. Thank you. Gracias. Modo pue.
Wati Biriz Elegiac Continenta Caribe foregrounds a hybridized and fractured syntax to show us, quote, dead people floating, unquote, and, quote, internal vísceras that now de se vienen hasta con la lengua por fuera evermore, unquote.
¿Cómo describir algo que no existe en tu lengua? Si solo es ruido en mi lengua para ti, que atrapado entre sinapsis buscan materializarse y terminan convirtiéndose polvo. La ceiba azules me llora sus poemas y yo inútilmente, colonialmente, les mato en este español. En la Caribe se amarran cuerpis a la pared de indígenas, de negres, de disidentes, para de a latigazos de balas hacer cuencas de rojísimo rojos ríos y asquerosamente fundar repúblicas de cataduras de silencios. Isla América pesa no por sus Andes, sino por toda la sangre ancestral que permea las capas de su apus. El musgo que siempre queda narra la espiral de la violencia, una y otra vez, una y otra vez, una y otra vez, una y otra y otra, una y otra vez. Pero por pendejis no entendemos la verdadera lengua. Ja, 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 ja. Cause my inner thighs are temblando como el sur del archipiélago, cracked into like the houses of those abandoned by the government. Se me inunda la pantalla de bella crisis. When your white blanquísimo river comes y abrázame con la espuma magmática, agua navana salpicando on my lips. Ahógame y ahógame, just like the people who die with the overflowed, sobreexplotadis. Rivers now infested con children's, sinónimo a futura asesinada of dead people floating, descomponiéndose hasta hacerse roca, hard, como la que en my legs yo tengo, esperándote. Haunting your aroma de sudor y néctar, skin, pellejo. Canto es sol, la lluvia como en María que sale de ti me mata, pero igualite que le invisibilizadi. 4645, 4645, 4645, 4. A nadie le importa mi muerte, what I feel dentro of my estómago palpitando es el dolor placer of the cosmos. Ay, vengo yo vengo y come de mí la humanidad abierta, pan de las océanas, níspero de la tierra, útera o agel serum, starving, wide open for them to come, all of them together, viniéndose a lava contra mar inside de la isla antilla of my internal vísceras that nowadays vienen hasta con la lengua por fuera evermore.
Exploring memory loss and memory loss, Angel Losada's Fading Star movingly depicts the, quote, fading fast, unquote, of his mother's memories.
Hello, my name is Angel Losada and I am originally from Puerto Rico, but I am filming this text from the beautiful Puerto Escondido, Oaxaca. I want to thank John Madera and Tessa Dwyer for giving me this opportunity, for participating in this anthology. And of course, I want to dedicate this reading to Tessa Dwyer and Giannina Braschi, and to my 2 tarot teachers in the United States, Rachel Pollack and Christine Payne-Toller. My text is titled The Fading Star. The Fading Star. This hand I have been dealt with is awfully heavy. In the first place, it's nearly impossible to compose anything more beautiful than Manuel Ponce's Estrellita. Second, Estrella is the name of my mother and my sister. The third reason is completely irrational. 3 years after I was diagnosed HIV positive, Mommy invited me to her home in Mayagüez. She sat me down at the table and asked me, "Son, do you have AIDS?" Staring straight back into her eyes, I lied. "No, Mommy, I don't have AIDS." Technically, I wasn't lying because I hadn't yet developed full-blown AIDS. The gag order that the nurse had imposed on me when she told me the news still had a powerful effect in me. I kept my mouth shut. After Hurricane Maria barreled across Puerto Rico, and after surviving that disaster, my mother was struck by another illness. All of her sisters had already suffered from it, but she hadn't. But when she opened her front door and saw the death and destruction Maria had left in its wake, her memory was wiped clean in just 2 weeks. The same thing happened to many elders in the island. Sometimes I call her and we talk for hours, but 5 minutes after hanging up the phone, she turns to my sisters and asks, "Why has an angel called?" The light of her memory is fading fast. That's why I can finally write this novel, because if she ever gets around to reading it one day, after 5 minutes, she won't remember a thing. My sister, who isn't a doctor, diagnosed her with Alzheimer's. One day, the president of the Puerto Rican Spiritualist Association told me Alzheimer would bring enlightenment to all Puerto Ricans. I couldn't agree more. Although I will spare you the agony of hearing the clinical details of my afflictions in the hospital, I want to end this novel with the main character dying in bed, like Son Simón, el gran varón. When I landed in the hospital, and there was no belief that could sustain me, and I felt that nothing could help me survive that catastrophe, I remembered the woman who had inflicted so much violence on me, recalling the terror I read in her eyes when she badgered me about having AIDS. It was then and there that I promised myself I would never die before she did.
Juan J. Morales' quartet of stirring elegies hauntingly offers his deceased father's, quote, breadcrumbs from the afterlife, unquote, quote, reminders, unquote, of the paradoxically unstable togetherness that love and memory produces.
Hello, friends. This is Juan J. Morales in Pueblo, Colorado, and I'm going to read you 4 poems that were recently featured in the Big Other Puerto Rican Hauntology portfolio. My thanks to everyone at Big Other, including John Madera and all the other phenomenal writers that are part of this folio. So here's the first poem, and we'll keep on going. Death jokes. My dad never flinched when he talked about death. In fact, he roused future plans as casual as planting his garden every spring. From there, jokes bloomed a smirk on his face. When I'm die, I'm gonna be buried with my checkbook, so whenever you spend my money, you'll have to tell me hello. I laughed and didn't feel fear for his life ceasing yet. I didn't know the plummet inside I would feel when I got the call. He always danced past death to say, Maria, when you kick the bucket, I'll lock the door, never answer, and pray everyone leaves me the hell alone. In the other version, Dad would tell us, when Mama goes, I'll tie my hammock up to the first damn trees I find in Puerto Rico. I'm still learning how death can joke back and join you for a sit on the patio, and how it can entice a smile for Dad's death jokes, nesting like the memory of his backyard that thrived with peach trees and lilacs, all blossoming around now empty garden beds, where he used to tend to tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, radishes, and onions until harvest. I'm left imagining him there, telling me one last punchline. The next poem is called Grandpa Money. Grandpa Money. My dad collected imperfect coins. He ordered limited editions in all state and national park quarters. He especially loved change made at the Denver Mint. He handed out $2 bills to my daughters and my nieces and called it Grandpa Money. He gave me a gold Sacagawea to have ready when he asked for it on his deathbed, something we never got to do. Ever since he passed, we are finding pennies in odd places, the old wheat ones, Lincoln face up, scraped, and always unclaimed. My mom and sisters believe Dad leaves them for us on dusty ledges, empty tabletops, and our lonely hallways. Everything he presents is mislaid in our bedrooms and offices but never spent. We do not use them to cover eyes or pay tolls. We accept his breadcrumbs from the afterlife as reminders that we are lucky to be here and together now. So you can kind of gather a theme with the four poems that I'm reading today. They're all connected to the passing of my Puerto Rican father, which was on February 2nd, 2019, and this is all in a forthcoming collection that I'm trying to finish, connected to that. Some humorous elegies and some sueñitos. Next poem is called Life Support. On a bleary-eyed morning, after 2.5 hours of sleep, I swapped Facebook messages with cousins in PR. I told them my father was on his way to the crossroads, passing on, and other ways to avoid saying he was going to die. At the end of a night when I didn't sleep in the hospital, my sister texted 2 hearts and I replied, "I love you too." In waiting for family members to arrive for goodbyes, I sent them a photo of my dad's tattoo and we talked about getting it in his honor, instead of all the other arrangements. I played phone tag with the Purple Heart, VFW, and retirees until we secured our father's military honors. Whenever they gave me condolences, I wanted to tell them, not yet. My work friend texted me a question and then insisted on bringing us soup. The first spoonful told me I didn't realize how hungry I was because I felt so not up inside. On a phone call I took in the ICU, my tío told me in Spanish that he was a rock rooted in the river for me to hold on to. I hope I translated it right and wondered if Dad could hear me talking to his brother. My niece asked about making plaster handprints so the kids, who weren't kids anymore, could chronicle Abuelito's hard-working hands. I told her about the first days in the ICU when he rested in bed, eyes closed, hands held up in the afterlife. Thursday night, when we took him off life support, the whole family surrounded him, and I held his hand, telling him it's okay to go. In English, Spanish, and tears, I promised to tell his story. He held on for 2 more days. My brother sent me the hospice care rep's name, telling me to leave a message. Whenever asked, we explained how no one saw Dad fall during his morning walk. We only knew the damage the doctor showed us on the scans. Everything else we carried was mystery, swirled with love and grief. All right. This is my last poem. Thanks for your time, your attention. It's called 1 Year Later, and it's broken into sections. 1. At the end of the beautiful war movie, the screen goes dark except for a dedication to the director's grandfather, who survived to tell of World War I. I leave the theater crying uncontrollably. My friends understand, but feel uncomfortable. I grieve alone in my car and prepare to visit the military ceremony in 2 days. I dwell on the melancholy of Dad's survival stories, hopeful that the wars within him are finally resting, even if he is not. 2. Then he is everywhere, like those lucky pennies always heads up. We are wondering Dad, a trickster, and if somehow kicked him awake. We do not tremble or turn away when we sense him. 3. Mom tells us she found Pop in bed during the witching hour. When she asked him if he was going to work, Dad told her he didn't have to leave until 5:30. She keeps insisting it just felt so real. He vanished when she climbed out of bed to make him coffee. 4. My sister's home security footage records orbs and streaks of light manifesting in her kitchen and living room. In one clip, several orbs emerge around my father's favorite hat. She invites him to talk to her. We obsess over her orb videos, seeking signs from the afterlife and knowing deep down that they are all just dust. 5. After a snowstorm, the neighbor, also named Jose, clears the snow from my mom's walk and driveway. Mom thanks him, and he insists her husband, Mr. Morales, told him to help. My mom tries to ask Jose what happened, when this happened, but the timeline stays unclear. A few days later, after another accumulation, a GI living a few doors down clears the snow and gives my mom the same kindness. 6. On Groundhog Day, the cemetery is almost empty, and we apologize for forgetting flowers. His epitaph, chiseled in the cold stone slab, keeps what feels holy. His response waits for each question we have. When they call to me, I will answer them. Okay. Thanks again to Big Other and everyone for listening, for reading, and and
Michelle
take care.
Carlo's exactly like nobody tells a story of floating in the interstices of being, quote, almost like everybody, exactly like nobody, unquote. A being and becoming that, quote, submits to no one, unquote. A comic story that transgressively exceeds and undermines its comedy by subtextually critiquing ultimately oppressive notions about appearances, etc.
Hi, I'm Michelle Carlo, and I'm going to read Exactly Like Nobody, published by John Madera in the spring of 2022 in Big Other's Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a hauntology. In the 1970s, my family lived through Vietnam, Watergate, hippies, Black Power, Gay Power, Women's Lib, and the infamous 1977 blackout. But sometimes it seemed my family would not survive my favorite aunt, my favorite Titi, my mother's youngest sister, Mari. I called her Titi Dulce, but for some in my family, she was una troublemaker. And like many Latinx women of her generation, Dulce finished high school, married young, and had babies. But there was another side to her, her true calling in life, to raise the political consciousness of our family. And for those of you who weren't there, everything was political in the 1970s. The number of the POW bracelets you wore to support the captured U.S. soldiers in Vietnam, the height of your platform shoes, the higher the better, and the texture of your hair, especially the texture of your hair. Now, in my large, proud, and sometimes quite loud Puerto Rican family, there are light beige, darker beige, brown, and darker brown members whose hair ranged from pin straight to afro texture. And back when I was born, it was sadly not uncommon that instead of asking if a new baby had 2 eyes, 10 fingers, and 10 toes, the burning question was, bad hair or good? But all hair was good hair to Titi Dulce. Straight, curly, coily, and everything in between. Even though her hair manifesto sometimes didn't always sit well with my family. I remember one night after she came over for dinner, she went to say goodnight to my mother, found her in the bathroom wrapping her hair, and said, Lucy, I cannot believe you are still wrapping your hair in those orange juice cans every night. This isn't 1950, you know. Women have choices now, and keeping your curls is an act of protest. We don't need to look more American. We are American. And as if further punctuating that statement, Dulce tossed her mane of thick, wavy, natural chestnut brown hair as the apartment door shut behind her. Easy for you to say, said my mom to the closed door. Now, this was the summer that either hormones or my beloved New York Mets getting into a second World Series turned my acceptably wavy, light auburn childhood hair into a tangled bush of wiry orange frizz. No comb could go through it without a half a bottle of Herbal Essence conditioner. Now, I could have picked it out with an afro pick, were I allowed one, but that implement was forbidden by my mother, whose only sign that her father was half Afro-Latino was the silky, jet black, tightly coiled hair she wrapped or ironed into submission daily. As for me, my orange bush was gathered every morning into a tight ponytail circled with a perimeter of barrettes and bobby pins in a futile attempt to tame the frizz. No one in my family had hair like mine. And when I started school again, I found out no one else did either. Now, in the 1970s, public school kids went from grammar school, K through 6, to junior high, 7th through 9th, and then high school. And while the academic, social, and biological challenges of 8th grade can be difficult for many kids, all was magnified for me because of my hair. I remember Tina and Nisi, Black Pride besties from the Bronx River Projects, who treated me as their beauty project. They'd take turns trying to pick out my hair in the locker room before gym class, saying, "Look, it's almost like ours." And then there were Marie and Antoinette, Sicilian-American twins whose father had a pork store on Morris Park Avenue, who at lunchtime would comb out the picking that Tina and Nisi had done and braid my hair, saying, "Look, it's almost like ours." And I accepted all their attentions without protest because Tina and Nisi kept razor blades in their afros, and Marie and Antoinette had penny rolls hidden in their scarves. This was, after all, the Bronx. So once again, I was almost like everybody and exactly like nobody, just like it was at home. Then one day after school, Titi Dulce came to pick us up for a shopping trip and found my mother once again struggling to get my crown of shame subdued enough for public consumption. "Lucy, let it go. Let Michelle's hair go free. We have choices now." "Easy for you to say when your daughter has perfect hair like you. Por favor, nena, please sit still." That night, I prayed to El Señor, God our Father, to whom I had been taught to turn in times of trouble. "Dear God, please, 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 please let me wake up with normal hair so my mom and the kids at school will leave me alone." But the next morning when I woke up, my hair was still bright orange, frizzy, and bushy, and I cried. Because that coming Monday was the day our class pictures were going to be taken, and I didn't want to look like me. And then, while sitting in front of the TV with my bowl of alphabets, watching Bill Cosby's Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, the answer to my prayers appeared during the commercial break like a vision of Christ on a cracker. It was called Curl Free, the natural curl relaxer for complete styling freedom, and showed beautiful young women with straight, shiny, submissive, and perfect black, brown, and blonde hair. My bet it works on red hair too, I thought, and I went on a one-child crusade to get my mother to buy it for me. And to my surprise, she did. That same day. And right after dinner, she moved the kitchen chair into our tiny bathroom, put on her oldest house coat and a pair of Playtex living dishwashing gloves to perform God's miracle on me. But while she was mixing it up, I had second, third, and fourth thoughts. For one thing, it stank. Stank. Worse than the run-over dead dog I once saw on the street. Worse than the bathroom after my brother used it. Worse than the worst thing you could imagine. And it wasn't just the stench. It was the sting. Even though my mother had opened the bathroom window and all the other windows in the apartment wide, our eyes teared and we both started sneezing. My father came in from the kitchen, took one look and sniff, grabbed my brother, and ran out the door. I thought I heard him say, "Good luck." Did I say the worst thing was the stink? No, it was the sting. As my mother combed the horrid potion through my hair, my scalp started to, at first, itch, ripple, and then burn. "Mommy, how long do I have to have this on?" I don't remember what she answered, but about 10 minutes in, I started screaming, which prompted my mother to bend me over the tub and spray me from the shower, saying, "Don't open your eyes or you're gonna go blind." When I finally did dare to open my eyes, I almost wished I had gone blind because a stranger stared back at me in the mirror. Yes, my hair was now straight all right and now half the volume, but it smelled like rotting garbage. And I didn't know who I was anymore. And that night I prayed to El Señor again, saying, "Please, please, 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 give me my real hair back. Please, please, please." Only El Señor had apparently gone on vacation because when I woke up, I was still a smelly, straight-haired stranger, and I cried again. No matter how many times we washed my hair that Sunday or how much Shalimar perfume my mom sprayed over me, the malodor still lingered. And when Monday morning came, I had to go back to school and take my picture. But before the picture taking was gym class, where Tina and Nisi stared at me in shock. "What did you do? You look white now." My mom made me," I said. Well, what could I say? That I brought this travesty upon myself? When it was time for the photos, the photographer held a tissue over his nose as I stared straight ahead and tried not to cry again. But worse came at lunchtime when Marie and Antoinette squealed, "Ooh, how pretty!" and whipped out their combs without even noticing the smell. But after a minute, Marie screamed, dropped the comb, and ran away. And I looked down and I saw the comb on the ground with a clump of hair in it. And I looked back up to see Antoinette holding the other comb with the even bigger clump in it. "Go home, quick, before you die!" she croaked before she too ran off. Now, I just ran home as fast as I could because I did not want to die in the street like that poor dead dog. And after my mother had rewashed, reconditioned, and combed through my hair again, I looked in the mirror and I thought I would die. My once shoulder-length hair was now patchy and asymmetrical, an entire decade before I would wear a similar style as a Defiant Art School student. "I'm sorry, Nana, we have to cut it off. It's the only way." So out came the good scissors, and by the time my mother was done, I had what people used to call a pixie, or close enough, and I went back to school. The stink faded, and within 2 weeks, new hair started to grow back in. Still wiry, still curly, still orange, but never again at that volume level. And no one ever played beauty parlor on me ever again. It was a miracle. And another miracle also happened. My mother stopped fighting with her hair, somewhat, and started using a new Conair blow dryer to create soft waves where once tight coils had been. And when Titi Dulce next came over and found my mother in the midst of her styling, she nodded her approval. And when she saw me, she didn't even blink. She just hugged me and said, "All revolutions have to end sometime. Choices have to be made. Sometimes it's not easy, but I am so glad to see that you are finally making your own." My mother is now in her late 80s, and she wears her soft white hair mostly natural. Titi Dulce is in her late 70s. She recently chose to stop dyeing her natural chestnut hair, and she can't wait until it grows back real. And as for me, my hair is still just like me, almost like everybody, exactly like nobody, and it submits to no one. Thank you.
Oscillating between Eros and Thanatos, Charles Rice Gonzalez's Deep Salvage tells the story of lovers, the illness of one compelling the other to, quote, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, unquote. Such inhalations and exhalations resulting in a kind of acceptance, however painful.
Hello, everybody. My name is Charles Rice Gonzalez, and I will be reading an excerpt of my short story, Deep Salvage, which John Madera published this year in Big Other, Puerto Rican Writers Folio, a Hauntology. Deep Salvage. I didn't think people died of AIDS anymore. No more friends falling ill in large numbers, no more hospital visit after hospital visit. No more Kaposi sarcoma, pneumocystis, Carini pneumonia, or friends wasting before my eyes. No more funerals every week. When I started dating David 5 years ago, it was no big deal that he was HIV positive. AIDS was like diabetes now. It's manageable. People live long, full lives. Back then, when it was different, I buried Ron, Miguel, Ken, LaVincent, and Jamal all within weeks of each other. With these men, I danced, had sex, and marched arm in arm as we fought for our lives. We swam naked in Fire Island, got sunburned on Orchard Beach's Twin Island, and dangled our legs over the murky Hudson River at the Christopher Street Pier in magnificent Manhattan. Ron grew so feeble he couldn't use the voice he raised in protest at so many marches. Miguel withered away from 220 pounds to 120 pounds in 8 weeks, as if the virus had eaten him away from the inside out, while his lover, Frankie, lost his brilliant mind to dementia. Ken, he was determined to beat AIDS and tried every experimental drug available. With every attempt, his kidneys and liver weakened until his body poisoned itself. Levinson's pale brown eyes were shut when Kaposi's sarcoma moved from his legs and torso to his face. He could barely breathe when the lesions inside his body took over his lungs, but he managed to whisper farewell to me after each hospital visit in case he died that night. Jamal's illness hit me the hardest because I loved him. Not the way I loved my other brothers. I was truly in love with him. But I was a coward. I didn't want to have to bury my beloved. I comforted many friends who lost their partners to AIDS. Their tears soaked through my shirts as I held their sobbing, heaving bodies, absorbing the seismic tremors of their hearts. Feeling their pain secondhand was overwhelming. I never wanted to feel what they were feeling, especially if I could prevent it. I had sex with Jamal, a lot of sex, but I kept my body safe and decidedly avoided the boyfriend road. But I didn't have to worry about shutting David's heart. The AIDS crisis was over, right? Just as long as David took his meds, he was good. And there was a menu of medications to choose from that brought viral downs so low they became undetectable. Gone were the days where diarrhea and nausea were a part of the HIV-medicated lifestyle. The early drugs' toxicity prevented people from work or even leaving the house. Today, most of my HIV-positive brothers and sisters worked, danced, drank, used poppers again, cuddled with their pups, fell in love, broke up, even got married and had kids. I met David at a poetry reading, my first one since college days. I like to read the occasional best-selling novel, but poetry, I never got it. My best friend Pablo invited me to the Nuyorican Poets Café because he wanted me to meet a poet he'd started dating. There's Emmanuel, Pablo said, nudging me. Isn't he hot? Without taking my eyes off his new beau, I nodded. Yum, no fucking doubt. Hey, Pablo warned, and I raised my palms, bowing hands off. I scanned the cramped room looking for other prospects, many hotties in their 20s, half my age. I figured Pablo and Emmanuel were leaving after the reading, so I searched through my phone to plan my next stop before this one had even begun. I was surprised to be engaged by the slam poets' theatrics, their gestures, melodic delivery, and bravura. I even followed what some were saying, but after 3 performances, I considered leaving when David stood before the mic. He was tall, lanky, and unkempt. Unimpressed and not attracted, I went to the bar near the entrance before I took off. Waiting for my beer, David introduced his poem. His voice was flat and low. His eyes seemed too large for his slim face. Then he closed them and leaned into the mic. My poem is titled Murmurs of My Broken Heart. Cheesy, I thought, as he began to recite. His voice didn't have the verve of the others, but poured forth like an unraveling silk ribbon. His love poem was a simple story of hurt, betrayal, and self-redemption. You said it's no problem, but when you looked into my eyes, you saw the virus, not me. The room was silent, except for David's drone opening the chambers of his loneliness, inviting the audience inside. The poem lasted about 5 minutes. His last line, "Why couldn't you simply love me?" felt like he had whispered it into my ear. When he finished, I felt the rivulet sliding down my fingers from gripping the cold beer. I took a quick gulp to push down the lump in my throat. It was as if Jamal had come back from the grave to lament his loneliness. Jamal was perfect, the perfect soulmate in every way, except that he was HIV positive. It was 1991. He was like me, brawny, a lawyer, loved the movies and dancing until dawn, preferred steak over anything, and drank beer or scotch. Jamal said he loved me. I love you too, buddy, I said jovially. I don't mean like that, he said, and placed a large hand on my heart. Like that. I was feeling it too. Not me, I said, moving his hand away. When we fuck, it's not just fucking, you know that. I looked away. He lifted my chin to look into my eyes. Baby, I'm gonna fight this, but I don't know how much time I have left, so love me, Marco. Please. We were perfect for each other, but the AZT he was taking to fight the HIV severely damaged his liver, so he had to stop. The only other options were holistic and experimental treatments. He exhausted them all, and the virus took him over. I watched him go from strong and virile to being wheelchaired into hospital rooms. I was with him on his last day on earth. His mother was asleep on the chair beside the bed. I knelt on the other with my face pressed to his hand, which was, despite all of his weight loss, was still large. My tears slicked his palm. I wanted him to feel them, to know how much I loved him and how furious I was that he was dying and how much of a coward I was not to give in to my heart and love him back. But my words got jammed and materialized only in tears those final moments. I felt his hand squeeze my face. I looked up at him and he was staring down at me. A warm smile stretched across his taut face. Marco, I was dreaming about you and here you are. Jamal, your mom is here too. She's sitting right there. I wanted to say it then. Jamal, I've loved you all along. I was a 25-year-old Latino lawyer on the rise in a white-owned firm where I was still closeted, and HIV was stigmatized to the heights. I didn't think about Jamal. No, I didn't think that sharing what I truly felt would be a loving act to him, or even a liberating one for me. I wanted to wake his mother and let him know he was lucid. As I moved away, Jamal's body raised a bit, then sank deeper into the hospital bed as he sighed. Holding my gaze, his eyes glassed over, and he slipped away. I raced back to him. I love you, I finally said, pressing my hand over his heart. But he was gone. I kept my hand on his chest in case his spirit was still in the room. I wanted him to see me and hear me repeat, I love you, over and over again, until I heard his mother whisper, Jamal? Her howl shattered the sterile quiet of the hospital room. When I buried Jamal, I knew I'd forsaken his heart to protect my own, but we both ended up brokenhearted. The eruption of applause brought me back into the room. David was obscured as the crowd jumped to their feet to cheer him. I gulped the rest of my beer, then ordered another. David's words reopened my wound, so I shuddered to shake the memory. Suddenly, David stood beside me and slid his drink ticket across the bar. As Emmanuel introduced the next poet, Pepe, the bartender, leaned into David. The usual? David nodded, looked at me, and smiled. Up close, David was exquisite. His eyes were an earthy brown, his lashes were long and curled at the very tips. His lips were full, even when they stretched to smile across straight white teeth. There was a sprinkling of freckles on his cheekbones and across his strong nose. I imagined his brown skin would feel as soft as fine suede. His slender fingers took the drink in the little plastic cup with a tiny red straw. Some of his fingernails were painted black, but they were chipped and uneven. Leaning forward, he sipped, and a few strands of his hair slipped down and got caught on his eyelashes. Blinking, he looked at me. I never look away from someone I want, but something in his gaze disarmed me. I looked down at my beer. Leaning into me, he whispered, Don't tell me a big guy like you is shy. No way, I said, gazing back. Sipping, he let his tongue lead before his lips to pull at the straw. Nice tongue, I whispered, because another poet was reading. So I've been told. David turned to face the stage. David was a good 4 inches taller than me, and I couldn't see past him. His loose linen drawstring pants showcased his tight rump. I imagined my hands cupping it. I smiled to myself because David isn't the kind of guy I usually go for. I like them broader and built like me. I like to grab onto muscle, feel reckless and rough, wrestle a guy down, pin him to the bed, and feel challenged by his strength. I leaned in toward him. Hey. Lifting one finger in the air, David pointed toward the stage without saying, turning around. I felt annoyed and considered slipping out and forgetting about that rude fuck. Then I realized that perhaps I was the one being rude by speaking while the poet was reading. Checking out his ass one more time, I decided it was worth the wait. The audience applauded, and Emmanuel announced a 15-minute break. David faced me and sat on the stool. We were eye to eye. "What's your name?" he said formally. I shook the hand he held out to me. "Marco." "And you're David." He placed his empty cup with a soft thud on the bar. "Good memory. Are you a detective or something?" "Close. A lawyer." "Want another one of those?" David nodded, and as I turned to Pepe, he had David's second drink ready. Pepe winked and placed it before him. "I'll have another beer." Pablo came over with Emmanuel. "I thought you left." Then he looked over at David. I gestured to Pablo. "David, this is my best friend, Pablo." Pablo high-fived David. "I know David. He's a rising star. Great poem tonight." David shrugged, then lifted his head. "Thanks." Pablo hugged me. "If you're not here when we get back, text me." I hugged him close. When they left, David stood up and looked down at me. "So, is it going to be a give me your number and I'll give you mine, or a your place or mine kind of thing?" I laughed. "I'm serious, Marco. I like what I see and I know you want some of me, so whether it's now or later, it's going to happen." I continued to laugh. I'm usually the aggressive one. David smiled. "Then why aren't you being more aggressive, Pops?" "Pops? How old are you?" "Will it make a difference? Because it's no biggie." "How old are you?" He took the last slip of his drink and waited for my answer. "I'm 46. I waited for his reaction. David nodded. "For real?" "I thought 30-ish, but closer to 40 because of your beard." "Beards are in," I said, rubbing my chin. "Yeah, for young white boys trying to look older than they are." "Ouch." "Oops," he said, gently placing his hand on my cheek, running his thumb along the hair on my chin. "I like your beard and your 70s feathered hairstyle." "Now you're fucking with me," I said, turning away. "I'm not. I noticed your hair the minute I came over here. Well, it was the second thing I noticed." Then he patted his palms on either side of my shoulders. "I first noticed all this. You must spend a lot of time in the gym. There's one in my building. Want to come see it?" "Now we're talking." Then he slowly ran his fingertips from my shoulder to my bicep to my forearm and squeezed my hand. I tugged him into me. "I live in Riverdale. We can cab it." "Riverdale? That's deep Bronx, right?" "I'm closer, on Avenue D and 5th. David's apartment smelled like dirty laundry. The small living room was cramped with found furniture, lamps with bare bulbs, and the like. The mini kitchen had plates in the sink and an overstuffed bag of garbage leaning against the oven. Although the building was renovated, David and his roommates lived in a romanticized version of an 80s squat. The rest of the story is on The Big Other. Check it out, and thank you all for listening.
Considering the spectral, quote, streets and haunts, unquote, the, quote, almost conspiratorial conversations, unquote, the various uncertainties, etc. in James W. Fuerst's El Hueco, it's fitting how often as if, maybe, seem, and its variations appear in the narrative, all cohering into a Bolaño-esque mystery.
Hello, my name is James W. First, and I'm going to be reading El Hueco, which is an excerpt from my novel The Turning of the World, and which John Madera was generous enough to publish in Big Other's Folio of Puerto Rican Writers in June of 2022. I'm just going to get right into it. As Jack trudges up the stairs to a cuckoo's that Thursday night, Umberto, Cardo, Chaska, and Graciela stop him on their way down. Umberto says they're going to another bar, and that Jack should go with them, because Ukukus isn't going to be good tonight. Something about the way Umberto says it makes Jack ask what he means, and Umberto says, "No es seguro," not safe. Jack's not sure what he means by that either, but when Chaska unexpectedly threads her arm through his, he tags along with them anyway. Chaska and Jack do a couple of bumps of Blanquita as they walk behind the others west on Espaderos to San Juan de Dios and Nueva Baja, essentially the same street, the name of which changes every intersection or two. And they stop at El Hueco, a bar on the corner of Nueva Baja and Desamparados. They've gone about 5 or 6 blocks from the Plaza de Armas in the direction opposite the Amru Astal, into a neighborhood Jack hasn't been to before, and which is probably more run down and impoverished, more depopulated and sporadically lit than any he's been to in the center of Cusco thus far. The street itself is also too quiet, enough to make him wary. El Hueco is on the 2nd floor, and given its location, exactly what you'd expect inside. There's a gashed countertop on an uneven bar with wooden posts at the corners from which drape strings of outdoor lights. The tables, chairs, and bar stools were clearly purchased for their utility rather than their aesthetics, at least 30 years ago, well before they became as beat up as they are unsightly. The decor of the dingy, chalk-pink walls is limited to the flags of some, but not all, Central and South American countries, and action photos of soccer players seemingly torn out of pulp magazines. As for the clientele, it tilts almost exclusively to locals of various coppers and browns, the majority of whom look either too young or too rough. The only thing El Hueco has to commend it, in fact, is its size. It's about twice as large as Ukukus, a portion out the back end of which is devoted to a low stage where musical instruments are set up, but most of which is comprised by the wide, foot-worn boards of a wooden dance floor. In some ways, Jack supposes he's lucky to have a chance to go to a real Cuscan dive, but he doesn't feel so much lucky at the moment as watched. A number of heads turned as they all walked in, and as yet haven't turned away. Although Jack and Umberto are close in height and overall coloring, and therefore the most likely to be pegged as touristas or gringos, Umberto snakes to the bar and shakes hands with a few people almost instantly. He seems to know someone everywhere, which leaves Jack as the primary source of scrutiny. He recalls some of Umberto's tales from other nights and wonders for a moment how far on the fringes Umberto has steered the group in search of a good time. Jack tries not to think about it. He narrows his gaze and takes a step toward the bar, and a very pretty and very young woman or girl, maybe 18, most likely not, in vampy makeup, ponytail, halter top, no bra, and skin-tight jeans, comes over to him with 2 glasses of something and asks Jack if he wants a drink. Before he can reply, Chaska steps between them and shoos the other away. It's completely out of character for her, so he asks her what's up. You have to be careful in a place like this, she tells him in Spanish. There are chicas paperas here, like that little whore who'll slip something in your drink, walk you outside, rob you of everything, and leave you lying unconscious in the street. Seriously? Jack asks. Si, she answers. And there are pickup boys too, but many of them will rape your ass before they rob you and then leave you lying unconscious in the street. Jack must make a face because she continues. If you don't believe me, Guapito, go outside and find out for yourself. But don't worry, if you stay with me, I'll protect you. Those are more continuous words than Chaska has spoken to him in all the times they've seen each other. And because this is her city, her neighborhoods, her streets and haunts, Jack's nearly convinced that she will. He orders pisco sours from the stony-faced bartender, then looks around from his position at the far corner of the bar against the wall. A slow, sad Spanish ballad scratches its way free of cracking stereo speakers. Someone has lost his heart, his love, and doesn't know where or how to get them back. And a dumpy woman in her early 40s or so, with pleated pants hiked high over her hips, spins herself slowly and sadly across the dance floor. Perhaps it's a change of venue, or scenery, or a simple difference in lighting, but Jack thinks he can rather easily identify the sneaky-looking con men and prostitutes, the pickup girls and guys speckled throughout the crowd. The latter are conspicuously well-dressed and young, likely underage, while the former are older and blend in with the surroundings. They all look on edge, though, as if they're starving and waiting for dinner to be served. It's a much seamier atmosphere than he's accustomed to, and he wonders why, of all places, they've come there. Umberto has several close, almost conspiratorial conversations with a man sporting an unkempt beard, a khaki green, short-billed cap over unruly locks of hair, and a matching khaki green button-down. Jack can't recall if he's met him before, but the man almost seems familiar, and not just because he looks like he's taken the first flight over from a documentary about Mao's Cultural Revolution, complete with uniform. Jack makes it a point to stay away from him. Every once in a while, Umberto takes a cigarette out of his mouth and raises his glass, and he and his associates salute Jack from afar, although he has no idea why they're doing it or what they could possibly be talking about. It feels staged and false, and Jack doesn't like it. The next time Umberto strolls by and is within reach, Jack tugs at his shirt and tells him he wants to go back to Ukukus. We can no do this, amigo. It is not seguro tonight, he repeats. What do you mean, no seguro? Jack asks. Umberto shrugs and shakes his head, as if he doesn't understand the question. Then he pulls out a tiny Ziploc baggie, flicks it with his middle finger a couple of times, and snorts a heaping noseful of coke right there at the bar, as the bartender pretends to look in the other direction. It is better here tonight anyway, amigo. No hay policía aquí. There are no police here. Is that what he means by safe? Jack doesn't know. Police or no police, though, there's a restlessness at El Hueco, a kind of adverse current buzzing through the place that eats at him all night, in addition to the worries he's already shouldering. And every bump he takes, every drink, every unfamiliar guy or girl who comes too near leaves him a little more rattled, a little more phased. He hangs close to Chaska and Umberto when possible, trying to remain alert and aware of who's around, and is almost even happy on one occasion when he recognizes that the guy wearing the yellow bandana and the members-only jacket lunging toward the bar is just that asshole Cardo, and no one to be concerned about. The worst part of all of it is that he's stuck. He doesn't trust the bartender or some of El Hueco's patrons enough to try to leave on his own, but has no luck whatsoever persuading someone to go with him. So they stay. And the only bright spot of the evening is the band, which comes on not too long after they've arrived and plays 2-hour-long sets around an hour-and-a-half break. It's an Afro-Peruvian group from Chilca, in Cañete province, which features members who are obviously the mixed racial and cultural descendants of Africans, Indians, and Spanish Creoles. There are conga and tom-tom drummers, 3 guitarists, 4 other percussionists, and a lively black-brown man at the center who has what looks like a wooden box hanging from a string around his neck, which he plays by opening and closing its lid to create a bass drum rhythm with one hand while wrapping it with a drumstick as if it were a snare or a cymbal on the other. Chaska tells him the instrument is called a cajon, which Jack knows means box or drawer, but he has to refrain from gawking at its owner and some of his accompanists, entranced as he is by the realization that these are the first black people he's seen since leaving the States. Only when he spent the summer in Germany has he ever gone this long without seeing black people before. And while the circumstance makes sense, there are very few in either country. It seems an inordinately strange similarity between two countries that have almost nothing else in common. Chaska tells him that the songs the band plays are known as landos, the backbeats and cadences of which remind him to some extent of more languid rumbas and plenas, also heavily infused with African percussive rhythms and patterns, the Afro-Latin Caribbean cousins of the blues. Chaska and Jack dance, she in her slippery huanos, he in moves improvised to keep up, to zesty, swaying melodies more suited to turquoise-rimmed islands than snow-capped Andean peaks. Jack wants to lose himself in the music and dance, to somehow summon the intensity and oblivion of the Takion-Koi movement that Ocampo had lectured about earlier in the week, the dancing sickness that had overtaken indigenous Andeans at the end of the 16th century, prophesying the revenge of their gods over the murderous Christian invaders, who in turn were terrified by what they saw. But he can't. He's heartsick with longing for Ava, for the east coast of the United States, and feels utterly estranged from the cultural home of his father, a home Jack has pursued in his absence but has never come to know. He wonders at that moment what he's really doing, what he's after, what he thought he'd find in Cusco, how he'd ever convinced himself that this was a good idea or that it might somehow work out. He just as quickly wonders whether it would have been any different if he'd gone to the islands instead. He feels foolish and naive and above all self-deceived, and thinks it'd be better if he'd never come. When the band finishes the second set, Jack and Chaska return to the bar for drinks. He's somber and quiet, and about halfway through his pisco sour when a slow, steady spinning begins to gyrate inside his head and quickly picks up speed. Chaska takes his face in her hands and stares at him, her eyes growing wide and grave. "What's wrong?" she asks. "Yo no sé." "Vamos, ahora," she says, and throws his arm around her shoulders. "Dove stai andando?" Umberto calls rattledly after them as they approach the exit. "Iago, come back. Stay. I make introductions for you with my friend. We're talking over here. Come, we talk." Jack closes his eyes tightly against the nauseating revolutions twirling ever faster in his brain and leans on Chaska for support as she hurries them out the door. There's a blast of frigid air. His body shivers and becomes so heavy that he feels like he's falling through himself to some obscure lower plane, deeper and deeper in the dark. Jack wakes up confused and disoriented before he realizes he's in his room at the Amaru Hostal. The window panes are clouded by condensation, but he's lying in bed too grubby and stale to have taken a shower. As he struggles to grasp what's going on, the bathroom door opens and in walks Chaska, freshly bathed, clad only in panties, her long black hair wrapped in a towel on her head. She opens and closes each of the room's dresser drawers, running her hands through them as she does. Appears to bend down to the base of the wall where the safe is, but Jack can't see what she's doing because his view is partly blocked by the edge of the bed. A few seconds later, Chaska stands, then takes Jack's wallet off the desk and starts picking through it. Stupefied, he considers slapping himself to make sure that he's awake. Why is Chaska there? Why is she undressed and going through his wallet? Is she looking for something? If so, what? He doesn't remember having brought her back to his room. He tries to retrace his steps, replay the night's events, but the more he thinks about it, the more it occurs to him that he can't recall anything after Chaska and he were at El Hueco. The last thing he remembers is feeling dizzy and off balance at the bar, but that's it. Everything else is blank. Chaska must think he's asleep, but that doesn't explain what she's doing. Jack sits up quietly in bed. She turns in his direction. He stands and rushes at her, grabbing her by the wrist. If she's caught off guard, she doesn't show it, does nothing at all to resist. The only reaction she makes is to lift her chin slightly, as if providing him with a target to strike, or readying herself for a kiss. Jack does neither. He asks her in Spanish what the fuck she thinks she's doing, but is unable to restrain himself from gripping her harder, shaking her, or something more. Her limbs are loose and yielding, her face expressionless but still somehow defiant, and she doesn't answer his question but rather directs his gaze to the desktop by shifting her eyes to it. Lying on the desk is a piece of folded notebook paper. Inside the fold is a handwritten note. In it, Chaska says she's borrowing 10 soles so she can get something to eat. She's sorry to take without asking, but she doesn't want to wake him up and is too hungry to wait. She'll pay him back with interest tonight. Chaska sits on the edge of the bed as Jack reads, the bed she apparently shared with him last night, and he has trouble looking at her when he's done. He feels guilty and shifts his eyes downward, although he's relieved to see that his underwear is on. He asks Chaska when's the last time she ate. She says Wednesday evening, a small supper of potatoes and corn. He asks her what day it is. She cocks her head skeptically to the side and says it's Friday. It's Friday morning. Jack's not sure if that helps to resituate him or not, but he's ashamed and humbled by his incomprehension of what her life must be like. A life lived in a poor and dangerous neighborhood on the outskirts of Cusco, where not only 1 or 2 meals but entire days can go by without food. He tells Chaska to get dressed, that'll put on some clothes, be gone for a few minutes, and return with something for them to eat. She says thank you and smiles widely, fully for the first time he's seen, before taking the rest of her clothes into the bathroom and closing the door. After they eat, Jack walks Chaska as far as the Plaza de Armas, where she fills him in on the missing hours from what she insists was just last night. It seems that someone spiked his drink, or at least that's what she thinks, because he became swiftly incoherent at the bar and then could barely walk. She was very lucky, she says, to get him downstairs, outside, and into a combi before he passed out, because he's so much bigger than she is, and too heavy for her to carry. Eladio the Old, with the insane Elvis coif, answered the outer door and only let them both in because she offered him a few soles to help Jack out of the cab and to his room. Then she took off his clothes, put him in bed, and brought him a glass of water that he tried to spit out but that she forced him to drink. Chaska's with him now. He woke up with her in his room. She seems to have spent the night, but he doesn't remember any of it or immediately believe her. He can't. If someone really did put something in his drink, a hallucinogen, a tranquilizer, maybe a psychotropic drug, it must have been a strong one, strong enough that it's fractured his consciousness after the fact. If he was drugged, would he remember anything? He doesn't know. He feels mixed up, baffled, not himself. And while visions of mostly naked Chaska are still vivid in his mind, he's thankful that he didn't actually do anything with her. He doesn't need that kind of guilt or self-recrimination hanging over his head along with everything else. As Chaska and he prepare to part, he thanks her again for the 10th or 11th time. She takes the 10 soldi note that she got from his wallet out of her pocket and tries to hand it to him. He shakes his head no and gestures for her to keep it. De hecho, in fact, he says, and reaches for his wallet. If what she says is true, she's been a tremendous help. She may even have saved him from robbery, assault, maybe both, maybe more, and the thought of her going without food again is too much for Jack to take. He wants to give her a few soles more. His brain counts automatically when he peers into the bill sleeve of his wallet, but has seen the set only 12 or 15 soles over and above what she's holding are gone. Those probably went for the cab and Eladio the Old's help, so she doesn't seem to have helped herself to more. There are 2 50s left. He plucks one out and gives it to her. She says, "Thank you," when she palms the bill, but looks away from him, down at her black combat boots. He asks her what's wrong. "Nothing," she says, "but I don't normally do this." "Don't do what?" She stares fixedly with stone-black irises into Jack's eyes, as if attempting to implant a notion directly in his thoughts through the sheer intensity of her gaze, then leans forward and kisses him. Then Chaska turns and walks off. Maybe she thinks her actions have made her point plain, but Jack has no idea what either her confession or silence means. Thank you.
Moving in and out of the worlds of the living and the dead, Carmen Bardegas Brown's Roots and Roots conjures a host of ghosts, evocatively offering a post-colonial critique of 500 years and counting of capitalism.
Roots and Routes by Carmen Bardegas Brown. It has been so long. 500 years? I remember it as if it was yesterday. It's so cold in here. Shango! Hobatala! Don't you see my tears? This heavy change cutting my flesh. Strange tongues like mosquitoes buzzing. I'm drenched in sweat and blood. This boat. I can still taste the cod Ina cooked with the yam. It was salty as the ocean. The giant river flows into the river that sometimes splashes in my face when another dead body is thrown away. I was captured. I was kidnapped. I was taken. Njemaja! Njemaja! Why are you silent? Can't stand the smell of vomit, of blood, of the constant defecation of all of us cramped in this eternal fear. Worse than animals. Ilya never kid our roosters, chickens, or ghosts trapped like this. Never. Never. What awaits me? I saw a woman carrying her dead baby as she jumped from the boat when the 3 white ghosts took some of us upstairs to see the sun. She dragged a few with her, but it was as if they all wanted to be swallowed by the waters of Yemaja. I saw big worms coming from people's skins, while the white ghosts looked at them with disgust. One by one, walking quickly in silence, except for the piercing sound of the heavy metal dragging against the wood floor. Black bodies adorned with worms crawling all over them. How many were thrown into the blue giant river? Nobody said a word. Orishas, why are you silent? I'm dead. Yes, I must be dead. My family will never know what happened to me. They will forget me. I will become a story to scare the little ones. so they will listen to their mothers and fathers. I will become a memory, or maybe nothing. It was just another day.